Everyone tuning in. My name is Sam Keenan and I'm back to host our 7th global webinar in this series and our final one for 2020. Tonight we'll be running through a Band 7 Masterclass with IELTS expert Teena Hartnett, you should be able to see on the screen.
Hello, everyone.
You might recognize Teena from our IELTS Speaking Masterclass earlier this year, or from a snippet of our webinar that was recently shared on our IELTS TikTok channel. She's one of IELTS' foremost experts, has hosted a number of masterclasses and webinars, and we're extremely happy and lucky to have her back here today. As we've said, she's here to take you through an IELTS Band 7 masterclass presentation, and then once that wraps up, she'll be answering questions asked in the Zoom chat or Q&A section, or from the Facebook comments for about 15 minutes. So make sure to ask your most burning Band 7 questions in the chat, and we'll pass them on to her. Without further ado, happy to hand over to you, Teena.
Thank you, Sam. What a kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. My name's Teena, and I'm honoured to be able to present this masterclass to you this evening. I welcome the opportunity to share my knowledge and almost 20 years experience of IELTS preparation. So I'll give you some practical tips in this masterclass this afternoon. This masterclass is designed for people who already have good English skills and are sort of seeking to get a level of English skills, which is an IELTS sort of 6 or more. So that's why we've aimed this at a Band 7. Okay, we will sort of touch on the lower band scores, but our focus is to gain a Band 7. Usually when people take the IELTS test, and we assume that most of you have taken this test before, that you probably haven't scored too well in the writing. So we'll be spending a little bit of time on the writing module. So yes, congratulations is in order for all of you for choosing the test that more people trust. The IELTS test does provide a reliable, true score of your English, and we don't compromise on that. It's a very comprehensive test, and your English language skills, a wide range of skills, are being tested throughout. So IELTS is the world's most trusted language test, and it's been leading the way for more than 30 years. So this means it really is a test that you can trust and have confidence in, knowing that your IELTS score will be accepted, respected, and consistent around the world. So IELTS gives you options for the way you wish to take your test. So we run it in 2 formats, the paper-based test and the computer-delivered. So our test is trusted by more governments than any other test, and it comes in the academic and the general training versions, which is just to suit test takers in different circumstances. IELTS is the only test that's approved for migration in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and it's the real test of English for success in your new home. We'd be interested in how you improve your English language skills, and if you've already achieved your score, how you've gained success. Every person has their own story about how they've achieved their work, life, or study goals. So share your story with us in the comment section on how conversations helped or will help you achieve your future goals. We'd really love to hear it. My computer's a little bit slow today, my apologies. IELTS is a high-stakes English language proficiency test, and this has set the standard for study, work, and migration for 30 years. And it is the test that organisations can trust. So professional bodies around the world trust IELTS, and it's a quality test that's proven to be reliable, consistent, and secure for more than 30 years, which is a really long time. IELTS offers stability and trust, and that's why it's the most recognised test in the world. When you are assessed in IELTS, we use a scale, and this will show where your English language skills are on a range from 1 being the 0, but 1 being the lowest to 9 being the highest. And you'll be given an overall score between 1 and 9, and you'll also be given an individual score for your skills in speaking English, listening to English, writing in English, and reading English. So a 9 is given to someone who's mastered the English language perfectly, and a 5 is given to someone who is a modest user. So that means they've got basic communication skills in English and are likely to make many mistakes. Now, as part of your preparation, you need to decide which test is suited to you. So we're going to focus on the 2 types of IELTS test delivered. So most of you will have completed the academic test in the past and you'll know it well. So you might not have looked at the general training test and the differences between the two. So if you're taking the test to enter the workplace in Australia, Canada, or another country, then you may have the option of doing the general training version. So the version of IELTS you take and the score you need will depend on your visa requirements and the requirements of the institution at which you plan to study or your employer or profession. So this is research that you'll need to do for yourself. So if your degree is in a discipline such as IT or engineering, which has placed more emphasis on your numerical skills than your literacy skills, then you might find the general training version is a better way to demonstrate your English language skills. And this is where you've got this unique choice. So remember, when you are doing the test for migration purposes, IELTS does offer this choice, and the difference between the 2 versions of IELTS lies in the subject matter and the different skills required for each version. So here are the 2 versions of the test. So you've got the writing, reading, listening, and speaking. The total test time is 2 hours and 44 minutes. And depending on which version you take, if you do the paper-based test, you're given extra time in the listening section, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So it does go a little bit longer. But if you're doing the computer-based test, you're looking at 2 hours and 44 minutes, and then plus your speaking test outside of that. Now, if you're doing the computer-based test in Australia, the order that it goes in, you do your listening first, then your reading, then your writing. And if you're taking the test first thing in the morning, you'll have your speaking test afterwards. If you're taking your test in the afternoon, you'll most likely have your speaking test beforehand. Now let's see what the masterclass advice is for the reading part of the test. All right, sorry, my computer's very slow. So if we have a look at the reading test and the different parts, let me just begin by saying that all the materials used in the IELTS test were originally designed for a non-specialist audience, and they're all of general interest. So you don't need to have any specialist knowledge at all to do well in the test. At least one of the reading passages contains a detailed logical argument. So you can see in the academic test, you've got 60 minutes to do 3 sections with 40 questions. Now that's a total of between 2,200 to 2,750 words. So that's a lot of reading. But as we look at the test in more detail, you'll discover that you won't have to read all of those words. The difference with the general training reading is that it has a different objective to the academic reading test. Its objective is to test language in a workplace or a work training context. So for example, if you're applying for a job or using workplace facilities or staff development. So they're just different in nature. It doesn't mean that one test is easier than the other. The level of difficulty is the same. Now, in your preparation, you need to familiarize yourself with the range of question types, because the reasons why there are a variety of questions in the reading test is this ensures that candidates are being tested on a variety of skills. Now, these skills can be categorized by the terms skimming, scanning, and reading for detail. Now, the key purpose of these skills is to improve your reading speed and efficiency. So for those of you who aren't too sure about the difference, skim reading is when you're reading for the general gist or the main idea. So you're reading extensively for the main purpose or the content of the text. So this is a skill that you'd often use in your first language. You don't read every word or sentence. Your eyes are moving very quickly over the text. You're just picking out the main words to get a general idea. So try practicing it when you read in English. Scanning is when you're reading to locate a specific piece of information. So it could be a date, a number, a time, a name of a place. And reading for detail, this is when you'll do intensive reading, but you'll only ever have to read part of a passage in detail. You won't ever have to read the whole thing. And this brings me to a common mistake in the reading part of the test, reading the whole text in detail instead of reading the questions first. Please always read the questions first. This is so you find out what you have to do. If you have to match headings to sections of the passage, then read the headings first so that you can focus on the main ideas you need to look for. Some candidates also make the mistake of reading to try and understand every word. Now, that's about 900 words in the reading passage. In fact, you might only need to skim read the text to answer 6 questions if it's matching headings to paragraphs, and then read just 300 words, say the last 2 paragraphs. You might only have to read that in detail to do a gap fill task with 7 questions. Now, as I said before, you don't need to be a specialist on the topic. If the text is about sharks, you don't need to be a marine biologist to get all the answers. The IELTS question paper production process is very strict and is trialed very extensively before questions go live, before any questions go live. So no candidates will be disadvantaged, no matter what their background is or what they've studied. That's why we can say with confidence that IELTS tests your reading skills and not your knowledge. And as I said before, there are a variety of question types on the reading test paper. Now, at least one of those 3 reading passages will contain a detailed logical argument. You don't need to have any specialist knowledge to do well in the test. There are 40 questions based on those 3 reading passages. So you should get to know the full range of questions types, the question types that are used, because these question types test different skills. So you've got multiple choice questions, identifying questions, true, false, not given, and we'll do an example of one of those in a moment. There might be matching questions, headings to paragraphs, for example, or sentence completion. You might have to label a diagram, or there might be short answer questions. Now, those question types that have an asterisk next to them, that means the order of the answers come in the same order of the questions for these types. So you won't find them out of order. They'll be in sequence. So please make sure that you have a look at all the different question types that you might encounter. And have a think about this, about your own reading skills. How often do you read a serious English language newspaper or magazine? Now, I'm not sure if we have a polling feature available there, but just have a think about how often you do it. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, one of the identifying questions that are common in the reading test are the true, false, not given questions. And basically, it's asking, do the following statements agree with the information given in the passage? Now, you write true if the statement agrees with the information. You write false if the statement contradicts the information. And you write not given if there's no information on this. So true if the statement agrees, false if the statement contradicts, so says something different, says something opposite. And not given means there's no information about it at all. Now, remember, the statements won't be expressed in exactly the same way as in the text. So look for key words in the statements and find similar words or phrases in the text. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question. And when you're reading the questions, not only should you try to find synonyms or think of phrases for the main words in the questions that you might encounter in the text, but also try to think about, is this a skimming, scanning, or reading for detail type of question? So Aboriginal Australians are descended from the inhabitants of Africa. And if we think about, we look at the word descended from, and we look at descendant, another word form of descended is descendant. And if we think of a synonym for descendant, we might think of ancestors. And if we do some scanning, we know that we'll be scanning for this question. We find the word ancestors in the second line of the first paragraph. And we pretty much find the answer right there as well. So that means that first question, Aboriginal Australians are descended from the inhabitants of Africa, is true. Now, if we look at the second question, ancestors of the Aborigines settled in Australia about 80,000 years ago. Now, remember, think about it. Is it a skimming, scanning, or reading for detail question? So we're looking for a number. That means it's a specific piece of information. So we'll be scanning. So we saw 80,000 in the first paragraph, and we see the number 50,000 in the second paragraph. And that's where we find the answer. And it contradicts, it says something different to that statement, so it's false. And the third statement, Aboriginal Australians are the most genetically diverse race in the world. We can see, just by skimming, we see the word genetic diversity resulted at the end of the second paragraph. So we might read that in detail and then go on to read the third paragraph in detail. Now, they're talking about greater genetic diversity, but they're talking about it being different between Aboriginal Australians in Australia. There's no mention of the rest of the world. So we read that last paragraph in detail, and we can say that there's no information given on this. So remember to look out for synonyms in the questions as you're reading the questions. Think of similar words and phrases you might encounter in the text. And remember, there will be distractors put in there, as we saw in that reading example. Genetic diversity is not the same as cultural diversity, so they were trying to throw you off there. Always start by reading the questions and then decide which reading skill is being tested. Is it skimming, scanning, or reading for detail? Only then, when you know what you're doing, go to the reading passage. When you are reading, don't be put off by words you don't know the meaning of. You can try to work out their meaning from the context and the surrounding words. I recommend you also read any headings, titles, or subtitles first, and look out for footnotes with definitions of any technical terms. So these could be in the form of labelled instructions. So, for example, hieroglyphics, if it was a passage about early writing systems. Now, if you're doing the paper-based test, you're given a reading test booklet and an answer sheet. So please write your answers directly onto the answer sheet if you're doing the paper-based test. You're not given any extra time, unlike the listening test, to transfer your answers. So answers should be filled directly in pencil onto the answer sheet. Okay? If you're doing the computer-based test, of course, you'll put your answers on directly onto the screen. You'll enter your answers in as you go. You've got 40 questions to answer in 60 minutes. So answer the questions that you find easier first, and then go back to any unanswered questions if you have time at the end. But never, ever leave a blank space. Just guess if you're not sure. If you're aiming to achieve a band 7, you need between 30 and 34 right answers, depending on which test format you take, if it's academic or general training. If you want to, you're allowed to write on your writing test booklet. The examiner doesn't look at that. That's fine. And you get 1 mark for every correct answer. You don't get penalised if an answer is wrong. You just don't score anything. Now let's see the masterclass advice for the writing part of the test. Now, the difference between the academic and the general training module lies in the reading and the writing, okay? So let's look at the academic task 1. and task 2, but the academic writing module, you've got 60 minutes to complete 2 tasks. So task 1 is an information transfer exercise. So you're given some information in a visual format. It could be a table, a chart, a diagram, a map. It could be some pictures describing a process, a flow chart, and you have to convert that information into text. And task 2 is an essay giving your opinion. For the general training version, again, 60 minutes to complete 2 tasks. Task 1 is a letter and task 2 is an essay. And for this essay in the general training version, you're allowed to have a more personal approach than in the academic version. How is your writing assessed? So you are assessed on 4 things. You're assessed on task achievement. This is for task 1, and task response for task 2. That's the first column. If you've ever had the opportunity to have a look at the public version of the band descriptors, you'll see that there are 9 rows and 4 columns. And one of those columns is task achievement for task 1 and task response for task 2. And this is basically how well have you answered the question? Have you done what the question has asked you to do? Okay. Each of these criterion is equally worth 25%. Now then we go on to coherence and cohesion. This is where examiners assess how well does your writing flow. Have you used linking words and sequencing words to connect your ideas together? Have you used paragraphing, which is very important? Lexical resource is your vocabulary. So again, have you used a wide range of words to express yourself precisely, or do you use simple words repetitively? And then we've got grammatical range and accuracy, and it's the same thing with your grammar. Do you use a range of simple and complex sentences? How accurate are you in your use of tenses? So as I said, if we go to the academic task 1, you have to summarize in your own words information that's presented in a visual format. So think of it as putting visuals into words. You've got 20 minutes and you should only spend 20 minutes on this task, as it only counts for 1/3 of the total mark. You'll lose marks if you write less than 150 words. Now, if you are doing the computer delivered writing test, there'll be a word counter that will show the word count for each task. Now we're going to have a look at a typical academic task 1 question. Now this one is asking you to compare 2 related graphs, a bar chart and a line graph describing the number of Japanese tourists traveling in a 10-year period. So the first paragraph here where it says the charts show the number of Japanese tourists, this is the this paragraph tells us what you're looking at. Please never ever copy this paragraph. You need to paraphrase that paragraph. So you need to change the words around, possibly change the grammar structure to suit the new format, but please don't copy it directly into your answer because it won't be counted in your word count. So the question is asking you to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So let's look at the 3 rules of writing. How do you approach the task? So you have to set the scene, you have to provide a context. So the first thing you need to do is write an introduction, which includes the what, the where, and the when. Then you have to highlight the key features with figures, and then you need to write an overview. So this is a good paragraph, okay? So what should you include in your introduction? As we said, the what, the where, and the when, okay? Now, the introduction in this slide, it covers the what, the where, and the when, and skillfully includes the instructions while at the same time adapting grammar to suit the new sentence structure. Now, there's never any need to explain what the x-axis and the y-axis is to the examiner. So I said before, the first rule was to write an introduction. Do you remember what the second one was? It was always highlight the key features with figures. So as in this sample answer. Now the data may be given in percentages or a range of units of measurement. So it's important to present the data correctly. So if it's in millions, make sure you say millions and not thousands. Okay. So they're describing what's happening in the graph and using numbers, using data to support that description. So they've described the bar chart first, and now they're looking at the line graph. Again, paying attention to the units of measurements in percentages, and you'll lose marks for inaccuracy. So make sure you write the figures and the ranges correctly. Now, if we look at band scores, if you've got access to the public version of the band descriptors, which I think you can find on the IELTSessentials.com website, if you don't include figures to highlight the key features in that task achievement column, you'll be limited to scoring a band 5 because it says there may be no data to support the description. So IELTS considers that being able to use data to provide support for the key features is a key writing skill. So that's what you're being tested on. So you need to show that you're able to back up your facts with evidence. And we know from the band descriptors that examiners assess your ability in writing to highlight key features with figures. Just how well you can do this is rated under the task achievement column. So if you want to do well on that task achievement, use data to support your descriptions. And the third rule of the writing was to write an overview. Now, this overview is a one-sentence summary of the most important information in a nutshell. And the skill of writing an overview is also assessed in the task achievement scale. So let's so again, if you've got access to the band descriptors, if you don't include an overview in your answer, again, you'll be limited to a band 5. So let's just quickly go back to that overview. You can put your overview after your introduction in your task 1, or it can go in the middle, or it can go at the end. But again, it's a summary of everything you've just written. You don't need to include any data in there, but just think of it as the most important information in a nutshell. All right. Remember that you've written at least 150 words. The examiner can read how many words you've written, okay? So make 150 words your minimum and between 170 and 180 your maximum, okay? Make sure you include an overview. It's very important. And make sure that you just select the most important information. So the most of something, the least of something. Have there been similar trends? Have there been any counter trends? Have you made, and again, make sure you support your points with figures. Have you made effective comparisons? The task instruction says make comparisons where relevant. So this still applies even if you're describing stages in a process. So if you're looking at some pictures of a brick manufacturing plant where the bricks are placed at higher temperatures or left for longer periods, you could compare that, for example. You must, of course, use the right text type or format for your answer in the academic task 1. It's got to be written as a factual report. It's not a letter and it's not a lecture. And your answers must be written in connected text. So you'll lose marks if you write in note form or if you use bullet points or dot points or numbered lists. And make sure you've got a lot to do in that 20 minutes and make sure you leave yourself enough time to check for mistakes in grammar and spelling. So some common mistakes. Remember, the task tells you to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. The task is designed to be completed in 150 words or so. So please don't think that the more you write, the higher your score will be. If you've written more than 200 words, then you probably haven't been selective enough and you've included too much detail. So just aim to identify trends or patterns rather than trying to describe every little change that occurs. Now, again, the task instruction is to report the main features, not to interpret the information or speculate on why any changes occurred. So you're not asked to explain why, for example, there was a small decline in the number of tourists and Australia's share of tourists in the early 90s. Just report the information factually. And not using data to support the key features and not writing an overview are both mistakes that will lose you marks. And if you have to describe a process, so for example, how bees make honey, you'll have a series of pictures to describe and make sure you identify all the stages of the process and don't miss any out. You'll need to include an overview stating how many stages are involved in the process. Examiners will also be assessing how well you use sequencing words to make clear the order of the stages in the process. Words like the first stage, the following stage, after that, next, in the final stage. So your ability to do that is rated under coherence and cohesion. So let's look at task 2 now, which is writing an essay. And here are the essay types that you'll encounter. There'll be an opinion, a discussion, a multi-part question, or a multi-part question and opinion. A multi-part, the number 4, the multi-part question and opinion, is very typical of a task 2 general training question. One of the things that you need to remember when you're writing an essay, and this is Essay Writing 101, is make sure you've got your introduction and you've got your body and you've got your conclusion. And remember, your introduction is where you tell the reader what you're going to tell them. So if you're being asked to give your opinion, state your opinion clearly in the introduction. Then use the body of the essay to tell them. So say why you think this way, why, excuse me, why do you have these beliefs? Why do you think these things? And give examples where you can. And then the conclusion is where you remind the reader about what they've just read about. So this is where you tell them what you've told them. So introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. Use the body of the essay to tell them, and the conclusion, tell them what you've told them. And that's the basic essay structure you need. And when you're reading the essay questions, you need to ask yourself, how many parts of this question are there do I need to address? So if it's a multi-part question essay, the chances are there'll be 2 or possibly 3 questions that you're looking at. So read the questions very, very carefully. Now let's summarize the masterclass advice, highlighting the writing skills that examiners are looking for and emphasizing the common mistakes I want you to avoid in this part of the test. So please make sure you allocate your time accordingly. For task 2, please make sure you give a full 40 minutes. Task 2 is worth 2/3 of your overall writing mark. So you're really punishing yourself if you don't spend the minimum of 40 minutes on there. And only 20 minutes on task 1. And be strict with that in your preparation and practice. Always decide on your position. You will be asked in the essay, whether it's regardless of whether it's academic or general training, you'll be asked to give your opinion. So decide on your position, okay, and express your views clearly. And remember, state what your point of view is in the introduction. And please make sure you use paragraphing. You're assessed about your paragraphing under coherence and cohesion. So that's a very important, paragraphs are very important to have. Even if you're doing the general training task 1, letters need paragraphs. Again, try to use a wide range of vocab and grammar. Okay. Read the questions thoroughly, analyze the tasks. So this involves reading the question more than once and probably reading it 5, 6, 7 times, just so you really, really understand what's going on. As well as using paragraphing, use a variety of linking words to connect and sequence your ideas together. Okay? Do not use note form or bullet points or numbered lists. You'll be penalised in that task achievement column because your format will be inappropriate. And make sure, again, that you leave yourself enough time to check your work carefully. All right, let's have a look at the speaking module, which the great thing about doing the speaking module in the IELTS test is that you get to do a face-to-face test with a real life human being. You're not talking into a computer. And this, again, allows for more real life communication and interaction. I know it's still a speaking test. It's an artificial environment, but still you'll be talking and engaging in conversation. So there are 3 parts to the speaking test. It'll run between 11 to 14 minutes. Part 1 is it's designed to relax you. It'll run for between 4 to 5 minutes, and there'll just be questions about, you'll be asked about, do you work or are you a student, or about where you live, or where you grew up, and then just some other personal type questions. And it really is designed to relax you. And then in part 2, you're given a topic that you need to talk about for, the examiner will say 1 to 2 minutes, but it's really 2 minutes. The examiner will try and get you to speak for that full 2 minutes. And then part 3 is a conversation following on from the topic in part 2. And again, that'll go for about 4 to 5 minutes. You are assessed in the speaking on your fluency and coherence. So again, if you've had a chance to look at the public version of the band descriptors, examiners match, or they assess your speaking ability by matching your performance to the band descriptors. So with fluency and coherence, this is how far you can maintain a flow of speech. So without long pauses or hesitations and false starts. And the examiners will also be listening for how well you use connecting words and signaling words to make the relationship between your ideas clear. Lexical resource is the range and accuracy of your vocabulary. So whether you can express yourself precisely without repeating the same words, and also using the correct style. Grammatical range and accuracy, again, the range and complexity of your grammar. Are you using a mixture of simple and complex sentences? And how accurately do you use tenses? Pronunciation, this is again worth 25%, and the examiner will be listening for how well you use pronunciation to convey and enhance meaning. How much does your accent cause strain for the listener? Now, all of our examiners are trained to have an international ear, and all forms of standard English are acceptable. So don't worry if you speak British English or American English, it's all acceptable. Okay, but to achieve a high mark, you must show that you can use a wide range of pronunciation features such as rhythm, stress, intonation, and talk at an appropriate speed and have a good control of individual sounds. So we're going to listen now to a band, this is a band 7 speaking test to a woman named Alexandria. She's from Colombia. Now, they were talking about famous people in part 2, so we're going to be watching part 3.
So we've been talking about a well-known person that you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, being in the public eye. Yeah. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being famous?
The advantages are that first that you will get really rich, and
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. It just stopped. I've tried reloading the slide and nothing seems to be happening. My apologies.
I think we can share this video in the comments after the webinar if we just
Will
want
that
to
be
skip past
okay,
this.
Sam?
Yeah, 100%. I think we have this on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
We'll share it in the comments.
All right.
Easy solve.
Okay. Yeah, my apologies for that. So as Sam just said, it'll be shared in the comments afterwards. But just keep in mind when you do watch it later that the examiners, you know, like I said, she was a very good example of a band 7. So, you know, pay attention to her fluency. She gave extended and appropriate answers. She didn't lose coherence at all. She used a good range of markers and linking words. So you'll hear things like first, actually, I think so, for example, in a lot of ways. She does hesitate sometimes, but that's not because she's searching for language. She just pauses and hesitates, trying to make her ideas clearer. With her lexical resource, this is her main strength. She uses a wide range of language, and we hear some beautiful, less common idiomatic and colloquial language like lose your privacy, selling their soul to the devil, getting dumped. Really good, rich phrases there. She does, however, make mistakes, and there's some inappropriate word use, like we hear a small news at the end of a relaxed evening, free dresses. Her grammatical range is good in both simple and complex structures, and she uses them flexibly. Some of her sentences are error-free, but she does make a number of mistakes with articles, prepositions, and subject-verb agreement and verb tenses. So you might be surprised by the number of mistakes you hear, but again, keep in mind, we do hear error-free sentences, and she does use complex sentences accurately. In regards to her pronunciation, she does have an accent, but her pronunciation is generally clear and easy to follow. She uses stress and intonation well to emphasize meaning. She has some problems with sounds, but she can still be understood. So my apologies we couldn't watch that together, but you'll get to see it after, and just look out for those things. Now, in the speaking test, you're given 1 minute thinking time in part 2, where you've got the opportunity to make notes if you wish. So use that time, write down keywords that you can use for each of the points on the task card that you're given, and use those 4 points to structure your 2-minute talk, and use the key vocabulary in your notes to develop each point. And the 4th point always asks you to explain something, and this one is often the one that gives you the most to talk about. If you hear yourself make a grammar mistake and you can correct it immediately, please do so. But otherwise, remember back to Alexandra. She made mistakes, but she just kept going. So if you realize that you made a mistake a few minutes ago, don't worry about it. Just keep going. If you're not sure how to answer a question, instead of being silent and humming and hawing like ho, 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 try to use language. Now, let me think about that. Gee, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that before. Try and use language to fill in those gaps. Practice giving extended answers to questions, okay? The examiners will often ask you why, okay? So be prepared to give more reasons, okay? It's good to rehearse where you work and study, but please avoid memorizing phrases. And remember, when you're speaking about your own opinion, introducing it with phrases such as "in my view" or "as far as I'm concerned" are very good. And the topics that you'll get in the IELTS test are a wide range. Okay. So we're just going to take a quick look at the listening test. It goes for 30 minutes. And you've got 4 sections with 40 questions, okay? Now, remember, as I said before, if you're doing the paper-based test, you're given a listening test booklet and an answer sheet. This is different from the reading test, write your answers directly in the booklet. You're given an extra 10 minutes transfer time to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. You only hear the recording once, okay? And again, like with the reading test, familiarize yourself with the different question types you'll encounter on the listening test. You'll have gap fill questions, matching words to diagrams or tables or maps. There'll be sentence completion, short answers to open questions. You might have to complete notes in a summary or a table or a flow chart. There'll be multiple choice. So again, familiarize yourself with the different question types, and remember, you'll only hear the recording once, and each section gets more difficult. So if you start out and you think, wow, this listening test is easy, you're right, it is at the beginning, and then it gets harder as it goes along. So don't get lulled into a false sense of security. Remember, you're only going to hear the recording once, so you're given time to read the questions. Use your time to read the questions. And when you're reading the questions, like you do in the reading test, think of synonyms that are going to help you predict what language you might hear in the listening passage. Not only are you allowed time to read through the questions before each section, you also get to check your answers before going on to the next section. So don't waste this valuable time. Make sure you read the questions first, because if you know in advance what you have to look for, you're more likely to find the right answer. You can highlight or underline any key words. This will help you to focus. And when you've read the questions for the next section, as I said before, try to guess the kind of words that you might expect. So, for example, if you see there's a question about climate change, try to think of related vocabulary that you might expect to hear. So global warming, for example, or rising sea levels. Keep these in mind when you're listening. You've got to be able to multitask when you're doing a listening test and look at more than one question at a time. Always be one step ahead. So for example, if you're up to question 3, you also need to look ahead to question 4. The questions on your question paper will follow the order of the recording. So if you miss question 3, but you hear the answer to question 4, you've got to leave question 3, answer question 4, and then go on to question 5. You can go back to question 3 at the end of that section or after the recording is finished, and you can try to make an informed guess about the answer. As with the reading test, never leave a blank space, always just guess. Remember, for the paper-based test, after listening to the recording, you've got 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. So be careful not to copy across any extra words. And a speaker's intonation or their tone of voice can indicate their attitude to something, either positive or negative. So this can be helpful in finding the right answer. Okay, so we're approaching the end of the masterclass. I hope this session today has helped you understand. This slide, look, it tells you stuff you already know. You've got to practice. You know, the University of Melbourne research followed 63 students over a long period of time and gave them an IELTS test at the end of their course. And those students who'd been speaking their native language every day had a lower level of English even after years of living in Australia. So push yourself as much as you can. Okay. IELTS preparation courses are great if you're new to taking the test, but they only focus on the skills you need to pass the test, okay? They only maximize the English language skills you already have, all right? So if you're not getting the score you need, an IELTS preparation course won't necessarily help you to improve your language skills. An IELTS Band 7 represents thousands of hours of learning, so please take a long-term approach. And anything that you do in English, you've got to be thinking and doing everything you can in English as much as possible. This is a good slide to take a screenshot of. It gives you some extra resources. The IELTSessentials.com website is very useful. There's a Facebook page, and there's a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. We also have an online practice test. This is a computer-based test, and you'll receive a detailed indicative score. Check that out on IELTS.com. And join our IELTS talk. There's a Meet the Expert webinar. January 2021. My gosh, the time has flown. All right, I think we are on to questions now. Would that be correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Tina, very much. It was an amazing masterclass, and I think we all learned a little, or frankly, a lot about scoring a Band 7 and IELTS in general. So again, thank you so much for presenting. We've had a lot of questions come in, so I'm happy to kick off now. The first question, someone has said, I am stuck at IELTS Band Score 6.5 in IELTS Writing. How can I increase my score?
Yeah, look, it's practice that makes progress, Sam. And the thing is, I know when you take the test, there's no feedback given on where you're going wrong in the writing. So it's hard to know where you are. You might want to make use of our IELTS Assist. I'm not sure what you'd call it, our program that we run, where you can have your writing. It's a paid service, but you can have your writing assessed by an IELTS expert, and you get a detailed report. You do both of the tasks, task 1 and task 2, and you're given some individual feedback. That might help you, or unless you've got somebody who's a teacher or somebody who's good in essay writing, and perhaps they could be having a look at what you're writing. So you don't know if it's your grammar, you don't know if it's in the task achievement area. So it's really, really tricky. And it is just a matter of practice. I'm sorry, I don't have anything more practical to say.
I think that was still a really good answer. There are a lot of tools out there offered by IELTS that can definitely help with that sort of thing. I think you covered the majority of them. Question 2, what are some strategies that I can use to achieve Band 7 and above in academic reading?
I think reading more not conservative, that's the wrong word, but I guess everyday news, like reading in a newspaper like The Australian, or reading ABC News or The Guardian newspaper, to help give you an idea of how writing is structured. It also will introduce you to some new vocabulary. And when you're aiming to achieve a Band 7, you're getting into the higher areas where examiners are looking to see some less common and idiomatic phrases in your writing. They're looking to see a wide range of vocabulary. It's not just about having good grammar. There's a lot of other things in there as well. So again, it's just, there's no other way to do well in the IELTS test, Sam, except for to practice.
I think that's a perfect answer. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Reading is super key, especially newspapers and the news and things like that.
Yes.
Question 3. I'm struggling to keep my word count at 250 words in writing task 2. Will I be penalized for writing 300 words?
No, but keep in mind, you're not going to be penalized for writing that many. But remember, these questions are designed to be answered in that word count. So you've got to make sure you don't have too much irrelevant information in there. So I think you'd just be scraping in at 300 words, but I always recommend to make between 270 and 280 words your maximum. Yeah.
Excellent. That's really helpful advice.
And you've only got 40 minutes, so, you don't have a lot of time to be writing a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. Question 4, hopefully quite an easy one. Can I write in cursive writing during my paper-based IELTS test?
Yes, you can. The examiners will be able to read it, yes.
Excellent. Question 5, what are some of the common mistakes that people make in the test, and how can we correct them?
I think a common mistakes people make is not giving themselves enough time to prepare. So people might book their test and think, oh, it's next month, I've got plenty of time. And every day still speaking their own language. And then time goes by and, oh, I've still got 3 weeks for my test, plenty of time. And then it comes to the week before the test. Oh my gosh, I better practice my English. And you're not going to make any improvement. It really is. I mean, look, I've had the experience of living in a foreign country and learning a foreign language. And it really is practicing and daily practice to make any improvement.
Excellent. Question 6. I find that I consume a lot of my time reading. What can I do to improve here?
I think, again, familiarize yourself with the question types, and ask yourself, is it a skimming, scanning, or reading for detail question? Because that's a common mistake that candidates make. They read or think they have to read too much of the reading passage without becoming proficient in being able to analyze the question and know what they have to do. So that's something you need to focus on in your preparation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next question. I got a band 7 in my last attempt at IELTS. My problem is I have a stammering issue and got 5.5 in speaking. Is there any advice you could give me on how to score a 6 or 6.5 in speaking with my stammer?
I'm not sure if you asked for special consideration, but it's unfortunate when this happens with people who stammer, because it does affect your fluency, unfortunately. But what I suggest you do is ask for special consideration, so the examiner might be able to give you more time in an extra section, and see if that might help.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the request for special consideration can be made quite easily to a test center. So amazing answer. Next question. This is well, actually, I didn't know the answer to this one at all. Can we use Ctrl+F to find a keyword during the computer-delivered IELTS test?
Oh my gosh, I'm not a computer nerd. I don't know. I'm sorry about that. I really don't know. You'll have to experiment with that when you take the computer-based test.
Excellent. I've just got the answer from someone behind the scenes. Apparently they cannot. We've just
You
gotten that through.
can't. Okay, you can't use. The answer to that is no. Some messages are popping up.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in on that one. Next question. I find the writing section difficult as I'm never sure how to start or plan the layout in my mind for a letter, story, or topic. What sort of materials can I use to improve here?
I think, again, just with the letter, I mean, you've got bullet points to write to. So, you know, the secret with the general training task 1 letter is that you cover all those bullet points and give an equal amount of attention to detail to each bullet point. So you shouldn't have any problems with, figuring out what to write about. I think the hardest thing in the letter is maintaining the appropriate tone and deciding, is this a formal letter or a semi-formal letter or an informal letter? So again, sorry, Sam, what was the rest of the question? I've lost it.
It was, how can I basically plan the layout in my mind for a letter, story, or topic?
Yeah, I think, and again, with essay questions, if you think about what the question is asking you, and if it's an opinion type essay, you're going to state your opinion in your introduction. So you've got your first paragraph there pretty much written, and then you'll structure the rest of your essay saying why you think that. Or if you have to write about an opposing view, that's another paragraph. So just be confident in your structure, okay, of knowing how you're going to physically structure something. So you've got the bones already sorted out, and then you'll get some ideas and be able to put the flesh on it.
That's an excellent answer. Very visual. I think that's, yeah, perfect. Second last question for the night. We're going to have to wrap up soon. Do you have any tips on how I can relax before heading into my speaking test?
I'm an advocate of deep breathing. So just really deep breaths in through the nose and then slowly out through the mouth. And you can do that when you're waiting in the waiting room. And also you can do it again when you get into the room with the examiner. Because the examiner's got to introduce you and speak in, or got to introduce the test and speak into the digital recorder. So that's another 25 seconds or so. you could probably get a couple of, you know, deep breaths in, and smiling. Smiling is also a way to help us relax. And the examiners want to see you do well. So, you know, remember, they're on your side. Yes.
I think that was the perfect answer. Thank you so much. Last question for the night. Today is my speaking test. Do you have any tips to achieve a Band 7 before I head in?
I think just look, there's nothing that's going to change between now and the time you head in. I think just relax and just be yourself. I think that's the best thing. If you've been speaking in English for a long time, you're probably a very competent user, and just have confidence in yourself. And like I said before, just try and be as relaxed as you can.
Excellent. That last question was from Manjeet. So Manjeet, we're all wishing you the best with your test today, your speaking test specifically.
Yes.
Excellent. Unfortunately, that is all the questions we have time for today. A huge thank you to Teena for all of those honestly spectacular answers. I think that was a masterclass in running a masterclass.
Thank you, Sam.
Remember, if we didn't have the time to get to your question tonight, you can just directly message it to us through Facebook and we'll get back to you with an answer. To all of you who took the time to tune in tonight, thank you very much for showing up. We hope you found this helpful. And again, just another huge thank you to Teena for the presentation, the answers, and all the expert IELTS knowledge tonight. If you're looking for more study tips, I recommend heading to our Facebook page, IELTS Essentials from IDP, our Instagram, IELTS.essentials, or our TikTok at IELTS. Make sure to tune in for our January 7th IELTS Talks Meet the Expert webinar, which Teena referenced earlier. And that's about it. Thank you very much again for tuning in. Wishing you all the best, and goodbye.
Bye-bye for now. Thank you.